Awesome. All right. Well, I'm sure everybody has plenty on their plates this morning. So let's go ahead and get started with some introductions and dive into the workshop. My name is Ryan Harder. I am the Director of Strategic Partnerships at Blueprint Technologies. For those who don't know us, we are a data intelligence consulting company. We're headquartered out of Seattle, Washington, but we've got consultants and salespeople around the country. We've been helping people migrate to the cloud and modernize their data estates and build out their analytics practices from BI to machine learning for 9 years now. And we've been partnering closely with Databricks for 7, close to 8 years of that. So we go back almost the beginning. Databricks just celebrated their 10th anniversary as a company last week at their company kickoff, for those who aren't aware. And so we are excited to continue that partnership, working closely with them to help walk through some of the exciting features of DB SQL that is expanding the capabilities of the Lakehouse to cover your warehouse needs. And so from here, I'm going to go ahead and ask our panelists to introduce themselves. We'll start with Eric and Rick, and then we'll hand it off to the Databricks folks, and then we're going to dive right in.
Hello all, Eric Vogelpohl. So I have responsibilities for tech and strategy and all things data at Blueprint. I have the best job in the world. I get to spend most of my life in Databricks. So happy to be here with everyone. Rick?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Good morning, everyone. My name is Rick Freitas. I'm a senior business intelligence engineer at Blueprint and manage a team of about 8 for the BI engineers, or data analysts, as they're called for many organizations. Justin, you want to go?
Yeah. Hey, everyone. My name is Justin Kolpak. I'm a solutions architect with Databricks, serving the Midwest region. So, helping understand how Databricks fits within the broader tech stack and architecture for your organization. And super excited to talk about Databricks SQL today. So good to meet y'all. Max?
Yep. Thanks, Justin. Max Fisher, Senior Solution Architect, just like Justin, based here in Chicago, helping folks in the Midwest with Databricks and broader Lakehouse architectures.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. So the way this is going to run is we've got some intros that Eric's going to walk through, and that's going to be a bit more of a presentation mode, and then we're going to get into the hands-on portion of the workshop. Hopefully everybody here got my email this morning with your login credentials and has gotten access to the notebook and the Databricks environment to be able to play along with their hands-on keyboard. And so if you haven't gotten that, or if you have had trouble logging in, please go ahead and email me or hit me up in the chat, and we'll fix that while Eric is going through this first portion. And this is meant to be interactive. So I've given everybody the ability to come off mute and talk. We ask that you stay on mute unless you have something to chime in with, but please don't hesitate to ask questions. This is meant to be very interactive. And also feel free to put your questions or comments in the chat or in the Q&A, and we'll get to those as well. But with that, I'm going to hand it off to Eric.
Yeah, great. All right, so as Ryan mentioned, we're going to go in kind of 3 sections here. The first 2 sections, you're going to hear me talk for just a bit. We're going to orient everyone into the Lakehouse architecture and make certain that we're all good with kind of general navigation, how to get around, so that things don't look too much like an eye chart. The great thing about today is we have absolutely no PowerPoint, so that deserves a round of applause virtually. It's my New Year's resolution to cut out of PowerPoint for tech demos. So we're doing everything native in Databricks. And I am showing you on my screen, if you see the number 1 Lakehouse at the top, we're looking at a notebook. And I'm in Databricks right now. You can see here I'm in my URL. And just from a couple, just a quick navigation aid. Right now, I'm in a workspace, or if you think of Databricks as a module, I'm in the engineering module. Maybe many of you have data engineers at your organization, or maybe you're a data engineer yourself. And if you want to prepare data and acquire data and clean data and validate data, you're probably going to do it in a notebook environment in this module. Again, this is the data science and engineering module. You can see I'm here now. And we're staring at a notebook, and I've just kind of hijacked the cells of the notebook to build out today's agenda. So let's cover the first one. Just make certain that we kind of hip to the lakehouse architecture and get some familiarity with navigation. So hopefully you guys can see the screen okay. You should be seeing a kind of a reference architecture. And this is kind of a simplified view of the environment we're in today, kind of graphically formatted. So kind of left to right, here's what we did to set up the organization or to set up the environment today. We acquired some CSVs and some data off of 3 websites. We have Iowa liquor sales and New York taxi and flights. New York taxi and flights are really common. Iowa liquor sales is a fun data set to play with. These are all free and public and open and available to anybody to play with. And we built a raw table, just a data that is exactly as the data is sourced. So the schema is exactly as it was presented to us from the provider. And we can retain that data and accumulate it forever, et cetera. And that's kind of what we do in the raw section or the bronze section, sometimes it's referred to as, of the Delta Lake or the data lake. And then we've processed data, we've cleaned it up. Sometimes it's called silver in the Databricks organization, but we've cleaned it up into a set of tables we just call clean. So we've enriched the data and joined it and done some data validation and some data quality objectives so that it's business friendly and human friendly. So we've gone from raw to clean. And at this point, the data is either analysis ready or machine learning ready. And it's good to go. If we wanted to make the data perhaps highly performant, do some aggregations and make it ready for BI and dashboards, perhaps we could have curated the data a bit more and put it into a gold section or a curated section. We didn't need to today, so we left that out. But underneath the lakehouse, probably the most important aspect is the fact that it runs on an open file format, an open data format. The Delta format is an open source format for storing and optimizing and managing transactions of data and creating data ecosystems. And all of that data is available to me in those kind of 4 general use cases. There are many others. We could come up with variations of a theme. But generally speaking, I have the ability to share it externally and, of course, do BI and analytics, data science, and then we'll play with some eventing and alerting today. So I'm going to stop there. Any questions on kind of how the environment is set up today, the data sets we're going to use, and kind of how we process them? Any questions perhaps specific to this chart? I want to pause there. If not, we'll go back. All right, good deal. So I'm going to come back to my notebook. And yeah, so one thing that we want to hit real quick, just to make certain everybody's, when they get to the hands-on portion that you're aware, we want to hit this kind of data explorer UI. So again, consistent with this theme of understanding the user experience inside Databricks, everything we need to know is simply listed in this left navigation pane that slides out. And I'm going to switch from my workspace where I'm at now, where I've got my notebook, and I'm going to jump over to this data tab. And when I do, I'm going to see a list of the catalogs that are available to me. Think of catalogs as much like servers. If you're familiar with maybe SQL Server, you used to have a server, and then you had a period with a database, and then a period with a table. Databricks honors essentially that same nomenclature. So in this case, we built a catalog called Workshop. And in it, we have a schema or a database. They're the same thing called data. And of course, here are all of your tables. And you can do some fun things like take a quick look at the schema, right? So you can see all of the necessary components. You can do a quick review of the data that's available to you. You get some nice descriptions. You can describe columns, etc. We can see lineage and a few other things. We'll get to that in a second. But that's an important navigation element. This data navigation element, think of that as kind of your home base when you're an analyst and you're not necessarily preparing data or doing machine learning. this is the place you go to kind of reorient yourself to where you are in the data warehouse structure. So again, I'm going to pause there. Any questions on navigation, let me know.
No, that's good for me.
Cool. All right,
And
so
Eric, I'll just comment. So just to be clear, so we have 3 different personas at the top, and you're under data and engineering, right? And so those options below change when you go up to the upper left corner and change your persona.
That's right.
So,
Yeah.
That's right. Sweet. All right. So great. Thank you. Good deal. So again, so just data, and then again, kind of think of that as your home base. We won't get too cluttered with the other things. So, all right, I'm going to hit back and we'll go right back to our notebook so we can get back to our agenda. Okay. I do want to make a quick note. I'll share these links out with you. I'll share the link to GitHub where we've published this, but I do want to note that Blueprint has a very cool product called the Lakehouse Monitor. I'll spend about 1 minute on this. It does a great job at helping companies with cost and optimization of your Lakehouse architecture. So when you get this, you can click here, you can view it on our website. And if you have any additional questions, we can address it at the end, or we can address it offline. It's a very, very cool solution. Okay, so now let's jump into the actual SQL Data Warehouse itself, right? That's the reason we're here today. We want to get our hands on inside the SQL Data Warehouse. So let me give you a little quick primer. So for 10 years of their history, I'm going to say 6.5, 7 years of Databricks' history. Databricks was very much a pure data engineering and data science environment, extremely powerful. Of course, compute over Spark, amazing scale out abilities, all your data on a lake, enormous scale and computational horsepower. But of course, we understand that there are these needs that are external to Databricks. So Tableaus and Power BIs and all of the various SQL tools that are available out, and including command line and data sharing. So basically think of the world as externalizing your data. Well, that was available, but it wasn't super efficient. So I don't know, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, time and space have no meaning anymore, something like that. 2 years ago or so, Databricks brought in a new module, a new capability into the Databricks ecosystem called the SQL environment. Maybe you'll see documents that used to be called SQL Analytics. It's now just called SQL Data Warehouse, because that's really kind of a good reference, and it's a common understood capability of getting access to data through a query engine. In this case, it's a highly performant query engine for the data that sits on your data lake. So I don't have to move it to any other environment. The fact that I'm using the quote unquote SQL warehousing environment just means that I've got a new way of getting access to data that's on my Delta Lake. So it's really just a new query environment for me. And it's powered by clusters, like all big cloud scale environments. The storage is distinct and separate from compute. And I've got some compute options. As of today, there are really kind of 2 or 3 compute options. There's one called the kind of classic and pro. These are the non-serverless compute options. This is where you define your own cluster size. You give it a t-shirt size and you give it some various other sizing components, and you have control over the size and structure, and you give it a period that it auto scales down and shuts off, and it's fine. But recently, Databricks is moving quite quickly to this environment of being serverless. So no longer do you need to do things like wait for the cluster to spin up. Serverless environments are hot and ready. Something like 10 seconds and boom, your queries take off if you're the first person to query. Once it's up and running, of course, it's up and running and it's very fast and away it goes. You don't really have a lot of knobs that you have to play with anymore. So all of that is kind of done for you. So a nice environment to be in for serverless. Serverless will be the new default option going forward. So Databricks team, anything you want to add to that primer on the warehousing piece?
I think the only thing I'd add is that as people are moving to serverless, they're really seeing kind of a total cost of ownership benefit. So we're seeing, when moving to serverless from something like Classic or Pro, you're looking at 20 to 30% cost savings on, those serving workloads. So definitely something to consider. I just wanted to bring that to the forefront.
Yeah. So any questions there? I know that's a little bit of a transition. Any questions before we get into some of the hands-on? All right, let's get in it. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to group these things together. We know you're eager to see data go flying across the screen, and I'm eager to show you. So let's jump to 3. And by the way, you see what I'm navigating here? This is just a slick feature of Databricks' notebook environment. When I use Markdown, so when I use the ability to edit this kind of like Word or a word processor, I get this nice menu to help guide through the structure of the notebook. So that's all I'm using, a little table of contents. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to touch on the fact that we've got these 3 data sets. They're pretty big. This one's got, shy of 1 billion rows of data. This one's got just shy of 80 million rows. I think the Iowa liquor sales is, I don't know, 5 or 6 million rows of data. So these are pretty hefty environments to play with. And as we noted before, we have our data structured pretty simply, and we got the raw tables, and then we created the clean. And then we have raw, and then I even created a gold table with some aggregations in it. And we have clean. Most of the tables we're going to use today are going to end in clean, _clean, or this _gold table, which is just an aggregated table. By all means, if you want to get your hands on any of the tables, you're free to knock yourself out. But in terms of preparedness, the clean ones are the cleanest. Okay, and we all know how to get there. We're going to jump over in just a second. We'll go over to the SQL environment, and we'll start that here in just a minute. In addition, we're going to take a look at data lineage, and I'm going to do these first 2 or 3 together, and then we'll jump in with some hands-on for the next 10-15 minutes. But with Databricks, we have this catalog concept, and the catalog concept, the Unity catalog, does this amazing job at keeping track of the lineage and the connectedness and the interdependencies of the tables in your environment. So as this graphic demonstrates, you can see that we created this clean table here on the right. The workshop.data.flights table is the combination of, you can see these 2 arrows in the graph. It's the combinations of making a query from airline raw and flights raw. So I did, select everything from flights, and I probably did a left outer join to airlines to give me all airlines. And then we produced this nice business-friendly clean table ready for analysis. And as you grow the interconnectedness of your tables to build out data products or data models or warehouses or facts dimensions, et cetera, Databricks keeps track of all of this lineage. Excuse me. So it's very nice. And then finally, real quick, we'll get some hands-on. We'll show how we can search for queries, and we can search for other objects in our environment using the search tool. So I'm going to stop there from the agenda. And if there are no questions, I'm going to jump over to the environment, and we'll get our hands on a few of these things, and then we'll pause for 10-15 minutes. And I see many of you are already in the environment. You can see that up here. So we'll let you take off. So I am just going to simply jump over to another tab so that I can keep this agenda open. I'm going to come to the other tab. And you can see, as I showed earlier, we have 2 navigation paths. We have one here for the data science environment. We're not touching machine learning today, but I'm jumping over to the SQL environment. And when I jump over to the SQL environment, this is my home page, and I have a new left navigation. As you would expect, it's things that are related to being in the SQL environment. So I can just jump to the SQL editor, or I can take a look at my workspace, which is a collection of either my folders or some shared folders. I've got queries, dashboards, and alerts. And remember our friend, our home base, the data tab. That's what gives me insight into my entire catalog and my schemas and my tables. So let's jump into Workspace real quick. If you're following along, we have created for you a shared folder. So I went to Workspace, and then I've got either my home, which is my user account home. You can see I'm logged in as Eric, or we've got a shared environment that we pre-populated. And underneath SQL Workshop, we've separated some queries by their subject matter, obviously. So let's take a look at one of these things. We'll bust open the flights folder, and I think we have a challenge for you. So maybe you can edit this and make it more difficult, but I've got obviously a query here. When I click on it, the query comes up. I can see that my cluster is up and running. I've got a smallish cluster running, and it's running in the pro mode. So that's all running for us. And a couple normal things that you'd expect to see in SQL, obviously have the ability to comment. So we wrote a question: what's the average arrival flight delay for all flights to Chicago in 2020? It's a good question. We've given you some prompts here about the average, the columns that are available to the data set. But if you don't obviously have this in a normal query, you can navigate the catalog. We're going to go down to our data. We're going to use clean, and all of the columns are available to me. And obviously this is a normal select statement, probably something you've seen a million times. And we're going to go ahead and run it, and we'll get the results back here in just a second. So what Databricks just did is it ate through, I don't know how many rows are in this. Well, I should be able to find out how many rows are in this. Let's find out how many rows are in this. Select count of everything from New York City, yellow, taxi trips, cleaned. And if I just run that command that's highlighted, I should get, oh, what is that? Is that 92 million? 9 million. 9 million rows of data, something like that. Yeah. So 9 million rows of data of available in the cleaned environment. So it just ran through that quite quickly. Let me get rid of that because we don't want it there anymore. So I'm going to pause there. Guys, have at it. You know how to navigate to data. You know how to navigate to the workspace to find some queries. You know how to click on the query button. If you want to create your own, you can click create your own. And you have access to all of those data in Workshop and the data schema. So I'm going to pause for a while and let you get some hands-on. If you have any questions, call them out. We'll solve it together. I should put some like on hold music now. While you guys are doing that, I'm going to go through and do a couple challenges myself. So I think I'm going to jump down to data, and I'm going to take a look at, oh, I'm interested in this Iowa liquor sales gold table. So I'm going to go over here and click some sample data. What do we have here? This is really cool. The Iowa sales data is really cool. They publish all of their state store liquor sales every day. And you get basically receipt level information. So you can find all kinds of neat correlations about who drinks what during a recession, or who drinks what during the good times, or what are people's alcohol preferences. It's a really interesting data set to play with. So I think from this, I'm going to create a query and see if I can play with a few pieces of information about this. First thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to select everything from it, and I'll get 1,000 rows back just as a sample set. And that came back, in say less than half a second, something like that.
Eric, do you want to talk about quickly how that run command up there, the little drop down, the difference between 1,000 and all?
Oh yeah, great, great point. So you can see here, I've got my run command and it says 1,000. That's because the user experience here, the screen itself, just limits to 1,000 responses by default, so that you're not filling up your browser with, billions of rows of data. That would be taxing to your browser, if nothing else. But if you do want to do a full data set retrieval, say you've done maybe some unions, or you've done something that actually requires you to scroll through more than 1,000 rows, you just uncheck it. And with that unchecked, now you get run without it, and it will run the full export instead of limiting by the limit 1,000 or taking the top 1,000. Of course, it takes much longer to fill the screen and to parse through pages and pages and pages of data. Now, I also will note that when you're in a external environment, say something like Power BI or others, that's not the issue. It won't default to 1,000. It will obey just your normal export. Does that make sense? I'm filling up my screen with a lot of liquor sales. How's everyone doing online?
Doing good.
Good. Any challenges? Gary, is it Gary or Jerry? Sorry.
It's Jerry. It's actually Gerald, so I go by Jerry.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's cool. And like I said, it's not my first time. This would be my second implementation of Databricks. So,
Nice.
But yeah, I'm liking the things that are moving forward, especially the serverless, just so you know. So we're trying to move that direction, definitely. So excellent.
Sweet. Very nice. Yeah, serverless is certainly it's fewer knobs and it's fewer things to check, and it's a lot easier, right? I mean, it scales up and it scales down. The savings is absolutely there. And from a pure SaaS perspective, I love it when, Databricks or any other company moves to a kind of an AI-driven, auto-driven, we'll take care of you behind the scenes modality. And that's what's happening with serverless.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I deal as the senior data architect, senior enterprise. I'm always looking at advancing us and moving us more towards the advanced analytics, data science, and at the same time, we're growing very fast. But like most modern corporations right now, the key is growth. And it's not as much watching as the flip side of that, which is working towards security, safety of your foundational aspects. Now everybody wants to grow as fast as possible now. So giving us into serverless keeps the cost down, and also we're giving access to much more analytic data that we need. So that's kind of
right on. Brilliant. All right, we'll do this for another 5 minutes or so. Let folks click around, and then we'll jump back to our agenda and hit a few more objectives. I'm going to see if I can find out. Let's see what the best category of sale or for liquor sales has been. I don't know why I'm so obsessed with liquor sales. I'm not really
a heavy drinker.
Not a drinker by any means.
I'm betting it's vodka.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating insight into human behavior.
It is a fascinating insight into human behavior, no doubt.
Folks, we're ready to move as fast or as slow as you want through this agenda, right? So if you guys are done and wrapped up with something, you feel like you've got a good handle on it, feel free to let us know in the chat. If you've got questions, don't hesitate to ask.
I'll make another note. You'll see that I'm just kind of banging this out brute force one by one, and occasionally I get errors because I'm making a syntax problem. But auto IntelliSense helps me out. There's also this nice little feature over here called Format Query. So when you're done, you can hit Format Query, and it puts it into proper SQL query notation for you, which is nice.
And that little feature also has a shortcuts menu in there too that you can pull up if you're doing a lot of SQL. You can see the keyboard shortcuts, which is pretty useful. So like if you want to comment out code, you can control /, which is helpful.
Yep, these little speed cuts, super nice. So one thing that I'll show you, being in this inquiry environment, notice that I'm on a tab called New Query. This one was the one that we had pre-cooked, right? This is the query that was in the shared folder, and you can see the path. It's in Workspace shared, and then the rest of the path. This one doesn't have a path yet because it's unsafe. It's just a new query. I haven't saved this yet. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And I'm just going to call it, my test of, I don't know, liquor sales. And I'm going to hit save. And what's great about this is that it basically saved into, again, can I go back to Workspace? It put it into my home directory, right? So down right here. So it just went ahead and saved. And you can see I have a whole bunch of other tests and things we've done for the workshop. But my query is saved right here. And I can make folders and I can organize all my things, etc. So if I want to come back to that one, I can just come back to that one and it opens and I'm ready to go. I'm going to steal a little bit of future thunder, but notice that I wrote a query here that is graphic ready. So some newer features that have been added, I don't know, maybe over the last year and a half or so, is you'll notice that I'm looking just at my results panel, my typical results grid, right? Nothing special here. But if I click this little tab, I get a visualization capability. So now I have the ability to look at this data purely visualized. So I can see it by graph or by line, wouldn't make any sense in this case, maybe by heat map. And I can start to build out some graphics that are quite compelling, and in a bit we'll learn how to put those onto a dashboard. So I'm going to take the sum. We've got group bys, so I haven't done anything there. I'm not going to do any normalization. Probably going to get rid of my sort so that it sorts consistent with the way I wrote the query. And I don't need category name because the category on the y-axis, you probably don't need to see sales because I already have the word sales. We'll put that in the title. I can change some data labels and make things dollars and cents and formats and colors and all the normal things you'd expect in a BI environment. So I'm going to hit save. And what this has done now is this just incorporated this visual into my query. And in the future, we'll get to this in a bit. We can actually make a dashboard out of this, and Rick will lead us through this. I can play with that.
Yeah, and you can do it right from here.
Yeah, we'll do it right from here. Okay, so if we're at a good stopping point here on just getting comfortable with general queries, let's flip back to our agenda and make certain we've touched a few things. Lineage. I do want to show you lineage. I don't want to leave the query environment before I show you this. So let's take lineage as a learning objective and come back and see that. So I'm just going to jump right back to my SQL environment, and I'm going to go back to my home base, the data tab, our favorite tab. I'm going to hit data, and I'm going to navigate to, again, 3-part naming, 2 periods. So I've got a catalog and I have a schema. By the way, in most modern data systems, schema and database are the same thing, and that's true in Databricks. So you could call data a schema, or you could call it a database, doesn't matter. Schema is for the most part the default term. And then I have tables, and we talked about that table. I don't know, the flights table. Let's take a look at the lineage of this. In other words, where did it come from? Who built it? How was it made? I can see it in just listing format. The 2 tables that made up this clean table are listed, or I can see it as a graphic representation. And essentially what Databricks just did is it queried an internal table that constantly monitors the interconnectedness of your data assets, and it built this map for me. And I can see that this table plus this table vis-a-vis a join created the clean table. I can see all of the columns, or I can hide some of them. In this case, it's not a view. We could have created a view, and this would be materialized as a view or be displayed as a view. I didn't. I actually created it as a table so that when you ran the data query, it didn't have to perform a join each time. It's just essentially a table ready to go.
And Eric, since you're there, do you want to show insights, that new option there?
I'm gonna let you do that. I'm gonna let you do
Okay.
that. We'll get there when we do the data, the visuals piece. So let's just jump back and make certain that we're keep going on the agenda. So I'm gonna jump back over to our notebook. So I'm back in the SQL engineering environment, and we did lineage and search. Let's hit search. Search is important because we have Unity Catalog now underneath all of our company's disparate Delta Lake data sources and their tables and their schemas. I have this quite amazing search environment. So let's take a look at this and see how powerful it is. And in fact, we'll edit a few and see how it behaves. So you can imagine now, if you are an analyst and you're new to the company, or you're at a remote location, or you're not in headquarters, or you're new to a data team, and you just don't know where things are, you now have a catalog searching experience. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to run back to our SQL environment, and up at the top, you get this search bar. And one of the first things that you're offered is advanced search. This is kind of just the general catalog searching environment. So I can click all, and I can search for, I don't know, all things taxi. So I don't know if taxi is a query, a really popular query that's used by a lot of people. I don't know if it's a table. I don't know if it's a dashboard or someone's written an alert. All I'm interested in is taxis. So the all experience gives me a list of all of the artifacts in the Databricks environment that have that somewhere in their descriptions, or their components, or their code base, etc. I can see it in comments. I can see it in the actual code itself. I can see it in the table name. I can change schemas to filter things down. As you imagine, some companies would have, hundreds of schemas and thousands of tables. So you can certainly narrow that down, or I can look for specific queries that meet that category. Dashboards and alerts. Rick will show you that in the future. So the catalog searching feature is quite powerful.
And Eric, that more, if you do the drop down for more. So here's the interesting thing, right? So we're actually showing assets across all of the personas, right? So up in the left, we know we've got SQL, which has our queries and our dashboards, but you've also got data science and engineering, and it's showing those assets as well, right? So your notebooks,
yep,
repos, that kind of thing. So
it's quite amazing. Prior to these concepts of catalogs, you really had to be kind of in the position, or in the situation of being in a data team, to kind of know where things are squirreled away. Now you can provide some reasonable structure to your repos and how you save content, but new folks can find data by their elements. Okay, let's jump back to the agenda. We have cruised through here. We know how to find data. We've seen lineage. We have used the search tool for querying. We've played with the query environment. And at this point, I'm probably going to turn it over. Rick, do you want to share your screen?
Yeah, you bet. You bet. Let's talk about a few things around visualizations and some things you can do in queries, which help you from a visualization perspective. So let me go ahead. So you need to stop sharing, I think, Eric. There we go. Thank you. I want this screen. All right, folks, can you see my screen?
Sure can.
Rick, can you maybe zoom in a couple of clicks?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, going wrong way. How about that? That help?
That's better.
Great. All right. So one of the things Eric was doing was pulling over a query around the liquor data, the flight data, which is I've got here. Before I kind of do a few things, I want to just point out a couple things. So if any of you have used kind of any of your enterprise BI tools, think Power BI, Tableau, Google Looker, right? In all of those, you have a semantic modeling layer, right? So where you have the ability to do your relationships between the different tables, your facts and your dims. You can do calculations and what I want to, the point I want to make here very clear is really SQL here is your modeling layer, right? So you do your joins in a particular query, right? Now you could run a single query that has everything that you want to do across a table or multiple tables, or you can break those out into different queries, which is what we've actually done for this example. We've got multiple different queries off of the same data running some different things because we're doing a few different things in each query. But let's do a couple things here. We're going to walk through. I know Eric quickly did show a little bit on the visualization piece. I'm going to do the same thing here. So you have the ability to create a visualization. You also, and I'll talk about this a little bit, but you also have parameter and filter as a couple different options here. And you can think of those as the way to slice and dice your data. And I'll show some examples of that here in just a moment. But let's go ahead and take this and create a visualization. So I've got this set up. I can keep it, value columns, group by stage 2. Maybe we want to make this vertical. We can do that. As Eric went through there, you've got some different options here for showing labels, not showing labels. Obviously, we're seeing the x-axis or your horizontal axis here. You can look at your y-axis. You've got your series set up, so if you wanted to move those around, you could. Can certainly change the colors of your data here. You could click on one and pick a different color if you wanted to. These are just what come up automatically. You can show data labels and do different formatting on this. Why don't we just turn those data labels on? And I think this looks okay. This is similar to something.
And Rick,
yeah,
real quick, I wrote that query. That's the one that I wrote where I renamed the column stage 1 and stage 2 for the Sankey chart. So if you want to convert that one to the Sankey visualization type, that's the reason why that's the reason why I wrote.
Okay, let's take a look at Sankey. So there we go. So that's interesting. It pulls up the right values based on the way that you set up the query, Eric. I like that.
Yep.
So so that's a lot of logic behind the scenes to kind of actually do that, to set that up correctly. So all right, so let's save this one. All right. So now remember down here, you still have your results query, and now you have a visualization as well as your other option. Now this, what we can do is take this and we can add to a dashboard. Now I could add to an existing dashboard. We already have a flights one, but let's just create a flights test. And, oh, sorry, create new dashboard. Here we go. Save and add. Okay, and I get this down here. I can actually click on this and pull up the dashboard, right? Okay, easy, very easy to do, simple. Now I have a dashboard called flight test. Now, the challenge here is dashboards in and of themselves are pretty useless unless you have a way to slice and dice the data, right? And so let's go back to SQL and let's look at a couple other, specifically a couple other queries that have been created where we can actually look at, let's see, what's this one? Yeah, actually, I'll show this one as well, where we can look at a couple of things that were done in here to pull in what's called a parameter. Now, let me step back. Again, we saw that we have an option for filters and parameters. These are slightly different in their usage. A filter is used over a column that is in the query that you have, that you've created, right? Where a parameter can be something that's specifically not in the actual query, but is available based on maybe another query that you created. And what I wanted to show on this one is that we've got a parameter called measure. And I believe I had that one pulled up. I did. Let's go. You can actually, open existing query from here. I can do a search on, here we go, names. So what I did is create a simple, basically union of some different names for a measure. Now, again, think about what we were trying to do. Really, the ability to filter or slice things in a dashboard is highly needed when you want to do some kind of analysis on your data. And so I thought one of the approaches here is, why don't we find a way to harvest different measures and put those together? So the first thing I did was create this query. Again, everything's query based here. I created a measure query that pulls together these different measures that I want. Now you can see I'm not actually doing any code that calls out what that measure is, but we'll do that in a separate query. So if I go back to, let's see which one we were looking at. Probably wasn't this one. That's okay. We can look at this one because it's using the same. It's using both measure. Now you notice one of the issues that you have, and again, this is ANSI SQL, but it's similar in just about any SQL. Anytime you use a format, you get a string, right? And so based on the specific visualization I wanted to create, I was only getting a string. It was only counting the measure. It wasn't summing the measure. And so I had to do some things and actually strip out that the formatting of that particular measure. But you can see I basically created a case statement here that when you use the parameter, again, a parameter in here is identified by these two squiggly brackets, then use the word trip count, which is in my parameter query that I created, and then do the calculation. For this one, it's a count. For this one, for the rest of these are sums, right? So anytime you drop anything that's got the squiggly brackets in, you get these options down here, which identify the parameter. And so the little gear icon gives you the ability to come in here and name it, choose the type of drop down. Now, if I just wanted to leave it where it's an open field where somebody has to type something, I'd use text, or if it's a number field, I'd do that. If it's a drop down list, I could actually add in trip count and all the other different options that I had there. But as you saw, I already created a query that that has that information. So can that load drop down value to input query? I'm not sure why it's doing that.
Basically, it's just a nested subquery, correct?
There we go. In essence, yes.
Okay.
Though it's doing that in the background, right? But it allows you to pull in the different things you want. So you can see Burrow is a different one that I have here. Again, have these identified with the squiggly brackets. This one, I actually just, I had done a distinct on all the burrows and just copied and pasted these into this list.
Gotcha.
And instead of using a query-based dropdown.
Cool.
So have those available as well, right? And then if we take a look at, so then again, so I've already created some specific I'm sorry, some things are a little broken here on a couple of these, but let me switch over to dashboards, and I'll show you the dashboard that has these parameters in it. And so in there, we saw that we had a measure parameter. So we've got a different measure that we can choose here based on what we put into the query. We'll apply those changes. And we can see that this data changed. Now, I don't have all of these set up with those parameters, but some of them are. And this is where it can get a little confusing, but I'm going to show you something where you can understand what's going on here. Like if you're trying to reverse engineer a specific dashboard, let's say somebody already created this, what you can do is go to Edit, and you can take a look at these three ellipses and come in here and change widget settings. So widget is basically a visualization that you put into a dashboard, right? And so I've got multiple widgets in here. And in here, you can see for this top 3 zones by bureau, it is using both the measure and borough parameter. So we know this one specifically will change when those parameters up above change. Now there's a few things that can be done here. These were set up to use with existing dashboard. These could be switched to a widget parameter. And what that means is if I cancel out of this, if you look at, let's look at this one down here and go into change widget settings. So I actually, instead of putting these across the top and having it filter across everything, because this data isn't actually in the other queries, I've set this to be a widget parameter, which means it's local. That parameter is local to the widget or the visualization that I've put into this dashboard. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
Cool. And so you can see a couple of these, like this one down here. I've only got a month of year widget, and it has me apply changes just to this one down here, and those change. Where these ones would be specific to this visualization. And then we know based off of, let's just take a look at this one, change widget settings. So this one is actually using measure and borough as well. And then it has the month of year actually at the visualization layer, right? Instead of at the dashboard layer. So let's close that. And so again, if I change one of these, let's do trip distance, Staten Island, apply. And we see that these two changed based on that. Looks like Staten Island's only got 2 boroughs. So this adds a little bit more flexibility into what you can do, because again, data just static by itself without being able to change, slice the data or filter it in a way that helps you look at and analyze the data differently. It can be is not very useful. So that's an additional option that was added. The parameters. There's also a filter option, and filter is something that can be used again based on a query, but on the columns that are available in a query, right? So for instance, if I look at, let's see, which one is it? Actually, I apologize. I removed the ones in here. But let's say if I used drop-off date, I did have another one in here that had that. If I add that, so again, similar to parameter, but it's not going to work across all of my visuals here. It's only going to work with the one where I chose again here, the drop off, which I believe. Okay, well, I actually don't think I have that one in here, so I could do this. All right, save. And it didn't change the name, as that's my bad. So there we go. So you can name it. Right. And so that would only work specifically with that visualization that I created. So that's kind of a quick overview on those two different options that are available, which gives you a lot more flexibility than just setting up a particular query that has static data in it.
Right.
Questions, comments? I know I went through that pretty fast. Other things that you'd like me to kind of backtrack through on that?
No, actually that works fine. And what for me, reminiscent of me working with some risk analysis in SAS, is having all of the separate externals, to go ahead and pull in there. So yeah, I'm glad it's involved because it helps us to get where you want quicker. You can save off those, like you say, the filters and the parameter settings. Yeah, and just utilize those. So excellent.
Yeah, great. Thank you for the feedback. Yeah, and again, so filter is going to work on a column of data that you have available in the query where your parameter does not need to necessarily have that in. It needs to be something that's available in the data set, but not available in the query specifically. So.
Right.
I have a question for you on the dashboard. So we use Power BI for our organizational reporting. I can see this as a benefit for maybe smaller dashboards for internal teams. But so let's say we have like a digital lead dashboard that we want to share with marketing. I see we can share what's there. I guess, how do they access this dashboard? Is it through the Databricks environment, or when it's shared, it's it's its own link?
Yeah, I mean, this is available in the Databricks environment. Now, you can if you're using a third-party tool like Power BI or others, you do have the ability to go in and connect to it. Right. You've done that. So you can get a connection string for it, or you can actually get a connection file, or you can get a connection string for the data, and do your server and URL information and then build it out here. But yeah, these options in here are just available in here, though certainly there are some things where you could export the data for a particular visual if that's something that you're interested in doing and wanted to analyze in a different tool as well.
Yeah, so in order to share like a parameterized dashboard, they would need to have Databricks credentials to be able to log into this and get it.
Right.
Okay.
And that's an important piece. So unlike tools like Databricks and Max and team, keep me honest on the Databricks side, there is no user license per se in Databricks. So Databricks is paid for by compute units. So sharing dashboards is not a license exercise per se. It is just a compute exercise.
Okay, thanks.
So this is maybe a good opportunity, Rick, whether you want to keep driving or I can switch driving. We'll hit our final two objectives and then we'll keep the bridge open and let communication go. And so Rick, do you want me to share back again?
Yeah, I was just going to quickly show this insights feature because I remember we
were
right.
Yep, absolutely. This is a very cool feature. It's relatively new.
Yeah, so this is kind of neat because it kind of pulls up a list of queries, frequent queries for the particular data set that you have available. And actually, let's go. Well, no, this is fine. We'll stay here. You can then actually create a quick dashboard off of that data set. I could choose a few things that I wanted to throw in here. And I'm just doing this fast so it we can see what it does. You can choose different things. And this was out of the data view. And it actually creates a quick dashboard for you. It throws a filter up here that limits the amount of data that's getting pulled, but that can be changed if you wanted to. You could type in a different number there. But this could be a neat way to quickly get to different views of data and then back in and see what the queries were used. One thing I didn't show, but you can in any visualization, you can view the query for that visualization and see what was done. And so you can actually back into that and see. But I think that new feature of insights is pretty cool because it can quickly give you something if you don't want to go through and create a visual for each one of your queries and then pin it to a dashboard. So with that, I can stop sharing.
All right. All right. So let's do this. Let me share my screen here. If I can. You know what, Rick, why don't you share your screen? I am missing the icon altogether on my Zoom screen, and I'll just hand it back to you.
Okay.
Oh, never mind.
Okay.
The bottom widget just popped up for me.
Yeah, you gotta hover over it for it.
Yeah, no, I was. It didn't.
Yeah, I know. We're all used to Teams here at Blueprint on the Blueprint.
Okay, I should be back in this screen. All right, so important alert. So this is really cool. I'm going to jump back to our agenda. We're on number 7. This is data alerts. So we're going to actually cook one real fast, and I'm going to prove to you that it runs. But, at Blueprint, we're really fond of saying, get data to the users in the context that they exist in. So we recognize for our data engineering practice and our advanced analytics practice that not everybody sits in front of a dashboard. They're not sitting in front of Power BI. They're not running refresh all the time, looking for intraday or intraday part or some operational condition. We recognize people like me. I live in Teams and Slack. I do not live in Power BI. I happen to love Power BI. I'm an amazing Power BI developer. I'm nowhere near as good as Rick, but I love Power BI for the purposes of trending, etc. But when I want to reach people in the world in which they are, so PagerDuty or Slack or Teams or an email or any webhook function that causes an action to take place, Databricks can get data to you in that context. So if you see my screen here, we actually have a working example of that. So in this case, in Teams, I turned on the webhook feature. By the way, that's available in Teams, much like it is Slack and PagerDuty and others. So I just get this URL, and I have the ability to create a data alert, which we'll do. And I actually took a screenshot real quick of the result of that data alert running. And I fancied up some markdown language here. Holy cow, we have a terrible breach, whatever. We have a value of 92 million, which is greater than 1. Obviously the trigger occurred, and you have the ability to get those links directly to your Databricks environment. But this is a screenshot from Teams, not from Databricks. So I'll walk you through how simple that is to create. So again, we're always on the left nav. We have just alerts. So I've deleted the demo one, so we'll create it from scratch. I'm going to click Create Alert, and I'll just call it Test. And it's going to be based off a query. Oh, and I just wrote that query while we were talking. I wrote a query that has a sales column and a category column. It actually found that the trigger condition is best off of the sales column. So in this case, we'll say when this column, I don't know, when the first object or we'll say the sum is greater than 1. It's obviously going to be. We'll set the trigger to just once. It doesn't need to run. I do have a custom template that I wrote. actually, we'll just use the default template. In this custom template, we could put specific markdown, right? So we could say a header 0, holy cow, and we could close our header, and we could do some really fun, you know, this is a test, and we could put things like value, what the value was, etc. And you have the formatting guide that you can see here. I will just use the default one. So we'll say, okay, so we'll use the default. We'll say refresh every hour. That's fine. Obviously it's gonna, it's run on our cluster. So we'll say create. And now I need to give it a destination. By default, it's gonna come up with an email address, which makes sense, but I'm just gonna hit add. And you can see here, I've already created a Teams workspace called SQL Workshop team. That is a Teams workspace. And that Teams workspace is enabled with the webhook. And I've already pre-created that by getting the webhook and pasting it in the alert destination utility. And that's it. And when I hit refresh, I can tell you, I'm staring at my phone now. I don't have it on my screen to share, but I'm staring at my phone now. And I don't know if you heard the ding, but sure enough, I just got an alert in Teams that said this alert was triggered. So again, if you have places where you want this data to go other than a dashboard or externalized via tools like Power BI, you have this capability. Any questions there? Okay, so let's get kind of nerdy with the last objective, and that is all around query performance and query history. This is a lot of fun. So yeah, we're going to jump back to our SQL environment, and we're going to come back to, we'll just come back to our query list. And I think I have my query test here. And I do. I'm just going to run it to make certain it's right. And here we go. I've got all the data back. Okay, so in this case, let's take a look at a couple things. You can see here on the screen that this query took about 1/3 of a second to run, right? So 300 milliseconds, 1,000 milliseconds a second, so about 1/3 of a second to run, and it returned, because it's an aggregated query, it only returned 114 rows back. So if you click on this, little sidebar pops out. And this tells you a lot of fascinating things about the execution plan and the statistics of the query. You can see the query itself. The query has an ID, and you can see some statistics about it, right? Who created it, the Databricks SQL runtime that it ran on, the cluster name that it ran on, and then the wall clock duration. So the overall duration even breaks it down by how much of the time it was spent querying the Delta Lake and focusing on only those portions of the Delta Lake that it needed to query. Then it executed the plan itself, the actual query plan itself, and then it had to fetch results, right? So that typically takes a while. So it takes a while to kind of serialize data back. In this case, not so long, 2 milliseconds. But overall, it only took about 1/3 of a second to return that entire query. Now, one reason that it took that little bit of time is because you'll notice that this query was cached. So Databricks cluster engines have native caching optimization built in. I don't need to set this. I don't need to write any kind of custom code to turn caching on. It's just part of the game. So users of dashboards that get in the morning and kind of wake the system up. And if you're on serverless, waking it up is only 7, 8, 9, 10 seconds or so for that very first run in the morning. If that query is the same query, it stays cached. So let's write one that's not cached, right? So we could come in here and I don't know, we'll say, I don't know, we'll do an average. That should recalculate things a bit. So if we rerun, it's just average, AVERAGE. I think it's just average. Let's hope. No, it's not average either. Oh, there it goes. Okay. Nope, it's not average either. What am I doing wrong?
I think it was AVG, but I think you selected just the select.
It is.
Instead of running it all. Yeah, there we go.
There we go. What? Let's do men. What am I doing wrong here? All right, SQL people, you have to help me. Let's see, column
If you
sales dollars.
expand the error
You know what? I don't
message,
think I have sales dollars. Let's do men. Let's actually follow the prompts. Men, we'll say bottles sold as men bottles sold. I don't want to order by something I don't have. There we go. All right. Stupid user error. Okay, so we just written a new query, and that took about a half a second. And that did not come from cache. That did not come from cache. So Databricks ate that entire query in about a half a second, and again, broke it down. And because it didn't come from cache, I now have the ability to see what Databricks did with that query from the ground up. So you can see it performed some scans, and then it performed an aggregate, then it shuffled, and then at the very top, it returned it to its kind of buffer. It limited the rows if it was necessary, and it kind of dispelled it back. It gave it back to my screen. So from the ground up, you can actually see in real time how the plan unfolded. And over time, this will get more sophisticated. You can see the rows that were returned or the time spent. You can see the peak memory used, if that's interesting to you. In a serverless world, those become less and less interesting because all of that stuff is done behind the scenes. You can see that Databricks' Photon engine, its super fast engine that makes these queries highly performant, was used. And you get some other details. Now,
and you don't get that, Eric, right, if it's cached, is what.
That's right. Well, you don't get this plan if it's cached. So if we run it again, if we run it again, that will be cached, and we don't see the query plan because in this case, it came from cache. Right. You can see here, it came from cache. Okay, so that's that. Now, change personas and say, well, what if I wanted to get kind of a history of how my queries are performing over time? So what we're going to do is we're actually going to jump down to SQL Data Warehouses, and I have my one. This is my query endpoint. This is the endpoint. This is the cluster environment that we're using to communicate with our Delta Lake. If I click on it, we'll walk through a couple of these things. Obviously, it's running, and we've got a size. I've named it small, but I changed it to medium. It's got an auto stop feature. We've got some scaling min and maxes. This is really due to kind of concurrency workloads. In a serverless world, these things go away. We've got connection details. So if you're interested in connecting vis-a-vis these various tool sets, they give you the kind of the pre-canned ability to connect to those, and you're essentially connecting to just this server host. You can monitor
the HTTP path.
Yep, and the HTTP path that's necessary, right? Yep, this actually says, hey, this is your environment, and this is the cluster. It's essentially when you combine those two together in these various tools, that's how you're navigating to this cluster. You got the monitoring tab that gives you, since we started our presentation this morning, how peak and queue management and runtime looked on the dimension of the number of queries. But we also have this nice query history pane. And this query history is great. So I can go see, since we started, all of the queries that you've run. So you've logged in as DH4 and DH7 and Rick and myself. We've played with queries. And of course, you can go through and see the specific one. So it looks like we had an error here. This is some idiot named Eric that couldn't write a min statement correctly, or an average statement correctly. But if we go here to say 7, it looks like 7 ran a query around showing average dollars. So it's the ones that we had pre-created. And that came from cache, and as expected, that took about 1/3 of a second to do the complete round trip. So you have this nice history of all the queries that have been made in your organization by user, by etc. So with that, that kind of runs through our 8 kind of learning objectives. We've gone through how to explore data. We've looked at lineage. We know how to find and execute and create queries. We've created visuals off the query. We've penned them to a dashboard. We've created data alerts. And then we've switched to the persona as the database administrator. And we've made certain that our warehouse is run and it's running well and it's performing within good user experience timeframes. So with that, I'm going to pause. Any questions and feedback and thoughts?
No, that's good. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So maybe you guys can share with us, how are you using Databricks, or are you planning to adopt? What's your, where are you at in your journey?
At this point, we definitely are considering putting in and trying to do some. We have a bunch of POCs we want to do and move more into advanced analytics, data science, AI, ML. I think we've got a review of ML flow here pretty quick. So we're trying to get adoption in here to get us where we need to go. So Chad Franz would be the one out of our team that really is going to escalate this and hopefully set up the next meetings that we're going to have. So, but that's kind of where we're at with it right now. Me having experience with it before, and also Chad had some experience in his previous engagements. So yeah, it was been on our list for about 6 months right now. So right now it looks like we're about to start some type of an adoption and implementation.
Sweet. All right, Ryan, I'm going to turn it back over to you if there's no other comments that the Bricks teams want to make, or the folks on the call.
Nick, yeah, Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, quick question. So so this warehouse, like it's technically just an abstraction of the Delta Lake, right? It's like not a physical, obviously not physical, but the data is still stored in the Delta Lake, and this is just a way to query it using SQL.
That's absolutely right. So to kind of prove that there's nothing up my sleeve, we can actually prove that. So if we come back to our data tab and we go to data, and then we'll pick a table, I don't know, flights, near, whatever it is, and I click details. So I didn't get too nerdy with this, but yeah, this is exactly what it's telling me. So first it says, hey, I'm a managed table, great. And here I have a storage location. So this is my Delta Lake. If I'm referring to this Delta Lake literally as my storage environment.
Right.
And my security guy's probably going to yell at me, but that is exactly my Azure Blob Store. So I've put my Metastore, my Unity catalog, on its own container with appropriate permissions. And then there is my store itself. Unity catalog will build a GUID for itself for every catalog you have. And then easy to see tables. And this table has a GUID as well. Within this, Nicholas, within this folder are a list of Parquet files with the Delta transaction log. And it's the identical set of data that I would use in the ML experience and the identical set of data that I would use in the engineering experience. I don't move it around.
Got it. That makes sense.
Actually, there's one question on there because it came up after we were having some preliminary conversations. Most of our stuff in data lakes right now are all in CSV, and we would end up having to, pick and choose probably and do conversions to Parquet. And I think that's a little simpler than it used to be. Am I correct?
It's incredibly simple. So all of my data started off as CSVs as well. So the liquor sales is a 4 gigabyte CSV I downloaded. The flights is a CSV that you can get once every 2 months. It's 2 months behind. It's on a website. And then the same with New York taxi cabs, all CSVs. And my notebook is, I didn't show it here, but I certainly could. My notebook is Jerry, super simple. It just says, hey, let's create a data frame. I'm doing it in Python orientation because I happen to be a Python nerd. Let's create a data frame of all CSVs. And so I just point to the path. And then when it reads it, if I want to apply a schema to it or clean it up, great. But if I just want to get it to Delta immediately, I just do dataframe.write. And because it's already in Unity, I don't have to do format equal Delta. I don't have to do any of these anymore. Unity says You've already told me where to save it. You've already told me the container and the address, and dataframe.write or dataframe.save as table.
Right.
That's literally the name, dataframe.save as table. Done. It registers it into the Unity catalog. So now I see a normal SQL table, and it automatically converts it to Parquet, to your question.
Yeah.
And then if I wanted to follow it up with an optimize command or some, Z ordering or something like that to basically apply an internal index, I could, but it's not necessary.
Right. Cool. Yeah. That was the one thing it came up, and I said, I believe it's much simpler than it used to be. And yeah, so yeah, that's the way to go, and saves us some steps, and we're not looking at having to jump through hoops in order to get it in the right format for us. So good deal.
Not only that, but notice that add data is here now. So, Databricks is just doing an amazing job at getting a wider adoption of the Delta Lake by really abstracting away a lot of need to even do work in a classic engineering environment. If I wanted to bring in data from a CSV somewhere that was on Data Lake, I would simply navigate to it. And I can pop data in, and it's all pre-canned and ready to go. Or I can, in the future, just upload CSVs, and it creates tables out of them. So it's really, really dynamic and easy now.
Good deal. All right. Sounds good. Because I know somebody was going to ask me that question too. So
yeah, no, that's it. And with Delta, I have all the ability to do all the things that Delta is amazing at. So I can time travel and go back in time, and I can do GDPR, and it's ACID compliant, and all the normal things that you'd expect a warehouse to do. I consider all of those things table stakes at this point, and they are at just enormous scale and a favorable cost environment.
absolutely.
From a Power BI perspective, and I've asked this before if we're just looking for a little bit more clarity. So we have a couple reports that go out to about 3,000-4,000 users. And what comes to mind is, I don't know that we would actually lift and shift to this warehouse versus keeping it, because it's a lot of movement.
Sure.
But if we were, what comes to mind would be, I guess, a compute nightmare. If we have this, that many people hitting this report constantly, do you have any idea how the cost of running a Power BI report like that against this data warehouse as far as compute would be?
So your Power, just to be specific, your Power BI report is in direct query mode, so that when a user opens the Power BI report and they start navigating, it's emitting the query directly back to the cluster. Or are you an import mode?
Import, yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of where my head was going. One of the reports was built off direct query. The one I just finished building, I used import. And I imagine the import would be the cost-effective way.
Well, it can be. So it's always a trade-off. So you're right. When you run an import mode, and keep in mind, Power BI has these new hybrid modes, right? So there's literally a hybrid mode, and then there's a new version of a hybrid mode where you can say something in Power BI as clever as, hey, like for the first two screens of Power BI, they're total aggregates. It's the sum of sales by month or by quarter, and it's a trend, and it's a month over month, and it's like executive stuff. Great. It's high level. And that can be native and direct in the Power BI data model. So that would be super fast, and it would never go back to Databricks and hit that endpoint, because it's all cached in Power BI. Then you can do like drill to details, where you want to switch into the dual mode or tell Power BI, oh, I actually need to get to an invoice level. I need to get to literally a transaction level. At which point it will kick into direct query mode.
Yep.
And it'll hit Databricks and it will search for that individual thing. Now, if you're running everything in direct query mode, and you send out a report and it goes out to however many hundreds or thousands of users, and you have the kind of 6 a.m., 7 a.m., or maybe it's follow the sun because it's on the East Coast over to the West Coast. So you got 4 different 7 a.m.s in the morning. Look, from a scaling perspective, Databricks will scale up. From a costing perspective, yeah, you will pay for it. You will have a node running that will be essentially and I don't have it in serverless to show you, but if we were to edit this, I might do something like create this up to and my individual Azure environment doesn't have enough quota. So this is just telling me, hey, Eric, your Azure environment, you need more resources. But essentially you're telling Databricks, hey, I'm going to create as much clustering horsepower really in 2 dimensions. So this is in this non-serverless mode, you're giving it 2 dimensions to think about. One is the actual size, right? And this is really a function of latency. How fast does it take for my data to come back? And by the way, all of the queries you saw today would have basically run the same if I was on a 2x small. That's, you know, a third of a second is kind of a normal result set for a big data warehouse like this, a quarter of a second kind of thing. So they would have performed well there. The other dimension is this kind of concurrency dimension. And it's saying, hey, look, if I have literally concurrent queries coming in from Power BI, I need to scale out and up. So maybe you would put this at, I don't know, large or something like that. And you would say to Databricks, hey, you can scale out as many nodes as it takes to run concurrent workloads. There's actually a good doc out there that tells you what this 1 in 10 mean from a scaling algorithm perspective. But yeah, I mean, look, there's a TPC DS, right? You're familiar with that data set. It's a really common OLAP data set that's out there. Databricks like smashed the world record on compute. It cost a lot of money, but you know, how you get 1,000 people running a dashboard. Yeah. So this is where I would say, take advantage. My coaching would be take advantage of Power BI's new hybrid and kind of dual schizophrenic mode, where it can run aggregate tables and cache and never hit it. And then when you need to drill to detail, then drill to detail. Because essentially what would happen now is if you said to your Power BI environment, I want to be so big and performant, now you're paying Power BI a bunch of money for P nodes. So you're like at P8 or P16, you're at these really big P nodes and you're paying that to Microsoft.
Yeah.
I would switch and say, let's look at what that looks like just paying a DBU. And then if you have like structured streaming data, or you have micro batch data and it's coming in every 5 minutes, 10 minutes, every 30 minutes, Power BI couldn't have kept up with that incremental pool anyway.
Right.
So you want to hit that endpoint.
Yeah, that was my situation in my previous engagement. We had so much streaming in, there was 500,000 end users. There was no way Power BI could have kept up.
Nope, it won't.
Right.
Yeah, in our use case, these are, I mean, our fact tables are about 180, 200,000 records. Like it's not a big model.
Then you should be import.
Right. I mean, and that's why that second report that I built, we used import just for better performance. And it would make sense. I just was curious because
I mean, I'll tell you, I'm working with a client. We've got import at a 1 billion row fact table and still using import.
Yeah,
so
I was just kind of curious, like how the cost behavior, and it's pretty much exactly what I was expecting, but it's good to know. Sure. Especially if we're having conversations about migrating.
One thing to note too, though, is one thing to note too is, you know, obviously cost is always a factor. But when it comes to like powering your Power BI reports, the 2 benefits that Databricks offers for, you know, cost, you know, price performance is with serverless, you actually don't encounter some of the same kind of cost factors you do with like a regular pro or classic endpoint. So if you have a scheduled refresh of your Power BI report or using direct query mode or whatever, if you leverage serverless, it spins up in seconds, you know, can load the report and then spin down in seconds. And so you can create this situation where you can get widely scalable and available computes for only the time that you need it to load and refresh your report, and then, you know, spin this stuff down. And then also on the same note, because it's only the DBUs, you're not paying for and waiting for, you know, the Azure VMs underneath it or AWS EC2 instances underneath it. And then secondly, you know, Databricks has worked with Microsoft on the Power BI connector. And so new features like native query and pushdown and things of that nature also makes the actual Power BI report process a lot more efficient and performant, because you're now not forcing those P nodes to do the work. You're actually having the queries pushed down to the Databricks cluster more and more. And so the actual, time to wait for reports to refresh is much shorter. So I think like that's where serverless could really shine in terms of balancing that, concern around cost with also the performance needs of being able to load these reports fast enough.
Yeah, and I think once we start getting into more, like right now, all our reports are aggregated and pretty light, but once we start getting into more granular reporting, that's where we'd want to look into these different options and compare costs and performance.
Yep.
Yeah, and those were good points, Max. And Nicholas, I would just point out too, is if absolutely make sure you're using incremental refresh where you can, because there's no reason you should be refreshing a whole everything in your data set, and if in fact you've got historical data that doesn't change.
Definitely.
Right.
Yeah, we're nowhere near real time streaming anyway, right? So
That was that incremental refresh. That's what you have pulled up here, the horizontal fusion.
No, this is brand new. So horizontal fusion came out. Incremental refresh has been out for about a year and a half now. There have been some changes to the way that it's been done in Power BI.
So it has the hybrid feature now, so you can do both import and direct query in incremental refresh.
Okay. Horizontal fusion. I've actually tested this on Databricks by flipping this feature on and off, and I've gotten some really cool performance results. This has got nothing to do with Databricks, but it does take advantage of the optimized query. So what Power BI has done, and I think it's still experimental as of this month.
It's still in preview. Yeah,
it's still in preview. So what they've done is they've just labored over the amount of direct query syntax that is sent over to Databricks or any cloud DW. It doesn't, just not necessarily Databricks. And they've really optimized the amount of just redundant queries that they're making. They used to do these things if you went to query history after you've looked at Power BI, you'll kind of scratch your head sometimes and say, why does Power BI do a count, then another count, then another count, and then a select, and there's 4 queries and I only needed 1. And it's like this mystery of why is it doing what it's doing? Well, they've gone through, and they've really reduced that down.
That's pretty cool. Thanks for that. I'm pretty sure we have the incremental load on those, but I do want to confirm that. It's something I hadn't really thought about in a while.
Yeah, the incremental, absolutely. Incremental load is cool. It's a little bit of a trick to pick up the begin time and end time to keep, your watermark basically up to date, whatever your date watermark is. But it works. It's there. Or like Max said, you can drop it and go to serverless and just be in pure OLAP mode and let it scale. Yeah. It's always a trade-off.
Which is what we wanted it to do anyway. Right, OLAP mode, right?
That's right. At Blueprint, we often tell clients that moving data is a tax that you want to avoid. It's why we love the Delta Lake environment with SQL Endpoint, because I shudder every time I take curated data off the lake and then I send it to some third-party warehouse. And then the third-party warehouse sends it to Power BI. So I say to myself, wait a second, it's 2023 and I have a gold table that I moved to another gold table that I imported into another gold table. I have 3 gold tables out there. One in Bricks, one in some other provider, and one in Power BI. Just makes no sense. You need one.
Yeah, totally agreed. Yeah, architecturally, like I said, I've been seeing this for a long time, multiple decades. But yeah, it was kind of like we went from mainframe and now we're coming back around. Really? No, not really. It's a data mobilization that tends to eat our lunch, right? And especially when you're doing all the OLAP stuff on the end, why having to jump through hoops and move it 4 or 5 times, right?
Right. That's right. You're gonna pay somewhere along the route. Be kind to yourself. Don't wake up at 4 in the morning on a Saturday because that last mile didn't work, and now you have a ticket. That's a cost.
Yep, definitely.
Good deal, Ryan.
I just wanted to check in, see if Drew or Jayanth had any questions that we hadn't covered yet. See if there's anything we need to circle back on or dive into some other features that we haven't talked about.
I'm good from my side. Thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I have no questions either. Thanks for asking.
And if anybody tells anybody that I don't know how to write an average statement, I'm going to hunt you down and.
Hey, we all do it. Serious.
Awesome. Well, that's pretty much it for our agenda. You know, we can give you some time back. We can also stay on and talk through other aspects of Databricks if you've got some other questions. Otherwise, we really appreciate you all attending, and I'll be following up with a survey. We could really use your feedback on how to make this better. And if there's anything we can do to help with talking through any of your use cases or any other questions around the platform more in depth, we would love to follow up and have some more conversations. Maybe talk through how we could help run some POCs for you, or map out what a migration might look like. So with that, thank you all for attending.
Yeah, thank y'all. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.